My name is Gough. I'm a Hobart-based artist. I grew up in Melbourne. I didn't study art in high school at all, so I came to it late, which I'm happy for, in that I had previous lives in different ways, the things that I have now to feed into my art. My first degree was in prehistory archaeology, so pretty much that first degree was critical for bringing a methodology to art later. So how I make is very much processes of investigating, collecting, trawling through, analysing, putting things back together, so reconstructing from pieces. Yeah, I'm a bookaholic since I was very young, so I'm trying to always figure out ways to not always return to the written word, but quite often it's part of my work. Another thing that brought me to art seriously was learning about my family history and not having that knowledge as a child, realising from my mum's family that we were Aboriginal Tasmanian people. It gave me some kind of energy, in a sense, to take the risk and leap into that unknown of art studies, and art became the right fit. I'm really much directed by the idea of collecting and time to loosely associate places with objects, with words, so say the archives. These are different ingredients for the artwork. More often than not, it's reading in archives, especially first-hand original text, so copperplate writing, police reports. So I'm thinking along the lines that everything is a crime scene, and I'm a bit obsessed by this notion that colonial Australia especially, the way of working is detective, and so the clues can be within the text. Where are the gaps? Why hasn't this been solved? What's the end of that report? Who's the culprit? Because I think there's been a lot of miscarriages of justice, or too easily things not followed through. Archival stuff's fascinating. It's strangely and sadly probably my natural habitat. Is second floor Tahoe, Tasmanian Archives and Heritage Office, and people just wheeling out in the trolley boxes of papers. I'm mostly interested in the early to mid-1800s in Tasmania, so working out what has happened to Aboriginal people. In art making, I'm trying to bring things together to show this in a hopefully inviting way that people may not wish to or know to go and encounter in the archives in the way that I do. Find the stories of my ancestors in these kind of archives, in amongst these volumes of letters that have been bound, and I've made a few artworks from these kind of documents. There's an artwork called Witness I created about the sister of one of my Aboriginal ancestors. She went to the police of her own volition in Launceston, having witnessed being shown a dead body, half buried, by the man she was living with, who basically had killed this person. And in her account, she names him as John Smith, which is like, oh my God, never figure out who that is, And then I kept thinking about this idea of I want to make it into an artwork because I want to break, the records kind of free from their entombment in a way. There was a chair and 5 kind of steps made out of pages that I cut in an electric saw, so it looks like this amazing stack of documents. These are like steps, and the steps lead up to a giant vellum leather animal hide, onto which I inked an anchor, because she described the anchor on the man's body, on his arm. There's this clue to the identity of this mystery man, John Smith. So the stories are guiding the material outcome, and they're also sending me on these journeys. But I reckon it's my journey to understand the past, as art's a good way for me to spend time with trying to understand it. But it's also a way to actually understand the place of women, of people of other cultures, children, so much about how society was back then. Crime cases are so interesting because you do get a cross-section of society. What I do is I turn up and request documents and just sit there and read them. Institutional staff are really critical to helping. I've got these compatriots in a way who understand what I'm doing. I used to be afraid to kind of explain what I did, but somehow it leaked out and they found out I make this art. There's particular people in the archives who have even taken to email me when they find something that they think is possible interest to me. I never thought it would come to this day, because I was suspecting it was this huge permanent Anglo cover-up that no one will ever share anything with me ever that shines a bad light on what happened here. Curators, historians, archivists are sending things through, and that is a massive turnaround. They're realising that things have to be liberated from their various archives or collections. I think there's a sign of a healthy country when things can get shared like that. The proclamation panel that's emerged in 4 or 5 different artworks. The first one was way back in '94. I was thinking about human nature and material culture, and anthropology always refers to this idea of material culture, that we are what we use and make, and it defines us. And at the same time I was often finding materials for the works from tip shop and op shops. With this old amazing carpet, I cut it out to be a big Tasmania map and edged it with blue wool, and then that became this thing that would be facing on the wall. So this displacement, I'm quite interested in mixing up outdoor and indoor objects, so disturbing things to show that really our history is disturbed and not resolved. So the bathroom scales, I pulled them apart and painted on there, so when you stood on the scales it stopped where your weight was, but that would be also your part in that story of, are you shooting or being shot or being speared or spearing, or are you the hangman? Can that be physically constructed? The notion of complicity in history, in all of us, is history. If I was perhaps more proactive, I would be training myself or just keeping up the learning of skills, because I think, technically it's also why I'm making in different ways with different mediums all the time, is possibly that I'm not, I never actively saw myself as one medium person, but it also means I'm not an expert in any. Sometimes I think video is the only way to logically express that, which is the immensity of the loss. There's one called Driving Black Home that has all the land grants up to 1832. That was me driving through all the counties of Tasmania. I think it was 12 hours of footage, and brought it back down to 3, as long as it took for all the land grants to scroll. Condensed it and matched it with the places. I reckon it's all about time. It's probably documenting my return to country. It needed the time and all of those places to be shown, and also how empty they seem now. No people, no vehicles, half of Tasmania, and yet 5,000 people slaughtered for that. It's not even hardly good enough for sheep, and yet people burnt it, looked after it, stayed here, and the whole murderous story. So it needed the film. As I'm making the work, I'm painfully aware of where things are at right now, or stuck, and the politics of now. This is more dangerous to work with the topic of now than it is, in a sense, working with then. But the then that I'm working with, I think, has been left behind too soon. Looking for Aboriginal history in the white records to shine that light, but then I'm really looking for what happened next. Working with the residue of history, and resuscitating it through the materials around me. I really want people to be curious. That's what I want them to actually be curious about the past and realise that we've got brains, we need to use them.